Ladies and gentlemen, drivers, gig workers, and everyone in between, welcome to This Week in Rideshare podcast. I'm your host, Jared Hoffa. It is Friday, February 20th, and this week, Waymo is under fire for remote workers. New York kills robotaxis, and Uber cranks up background checks. Legal Rideshare breaks it down. And from Legal Rideshare, I'm joined by the co-founder and lead attorney, Brian Green. Bryant, happy Friday.
Happy Friday, Jared. Great to be back for yet another episode of This Week in Rideshare.
I feel like that could be its own little montage there. And a
Please-
new set.
please don't.
I have a new set now, so I even have the This Week in Rideshare. I kind of upgraded for the team.
It looks great. You know, we're a real podcast now.
We are, right? We're every time we're getting a little bit better, which is great.
That's right. We're improving every episode for you, the watcher, the listener. This is what we do.
This is what we do. This is what we live for. All right, we're going to jump into stories this week. Pretty interesting, mostly self-explanatory, but we're going to jump into the first, which I do think is being misconstrued, but we'll discuss it. Waymo is defending remote assistance on its cars. Now, this is from Reuters, and they reported, quote, self-driving unit Waymo on Tuesday defended its use of remote assistance personnel in the face of questions from Congress and said they have never been used to move robotaxis in U.S. on-road operations. Waymo told the Democratic Senator Ed Markey in a letter that it has not used remote driving or, as they say, teleoperations to perform driving tasks. In rare circumstances, some U.S.-based personnel could prompt a stopped AV to move forward at 2 miles per hour for a short distance to exit the travel lane, but that has not happened outside of training. Markey and some Republican representatives have raised concerns about the use of remote personnel, including some remote assistance personnel based in the Philippines. So, Brian, what it seems like, and tell me if I'm wrong here, and I weirdly might be sticking up for Waymo here, I think the governors are thinking that these Waymos are basically being remote controlled all the time by people in Philippines, which is a security risk, and they shouldn't do that. It sounds like that's what's the questioning here.
You know, I think that this is a story of people not really understanding what the technology is. And I'm not sure that I really blame either side. Well, let me rephrase that. I'm not sure that I really blame the government officials for not understanding the technology. I think Waymo needs to do a better job of explaining exactly what's going on to the people who are making decisions about whether to allow these autonomous vehicles on their roads. Before new technology comes into a city, the city or the state or the nation or whatever it is needs to understand what they're getting themselves into. And for the longest time, Waymo has billed itself as autonomous driving, as a system that can learn and navigate roads. And now I think the lawmakers are finding out, well, actually, there might be some people behind the wheel remotely in some other country, and they're concerned about what exactly those people are doing, what kind of control they have over the vehicles. And that's on the company to explain, what is the technology, what can it do, when might human assistance be necessary, and who is that human assistance when it becomes necessary. All of these different questions need to be addressed, need to be answered, and the company needs to make sure that the communities are comfortable with what's going out onto the roads. So that's a very long way of me saying, if people are confused, the companies need to do a better job of explaining so that we're clear about what is going on our city streets, and the risks and benefits can be appropriately weighed.
Yeah, and to your point, and to kind of wrap up here with this story, and to confirm what you said, and Ed Markey, the Democratic senator, and I do agree with this, he said in a February 3rd letter that Waymo had provided little public information about its policies and remote personnel, which I agree. I've seen a ton of press releases about Waymo. We talk about it pretty much every episode for the last year, and they've always highlighted all the things Waymo does. This is the first time I even heard anything about remote personnel.
Right.
And so I agree with him on that.
Yeah. Well, I think it comes down to, what is this technology and how good is it? Are like I have been told, everything that I've read is that Waymo can operate the cars autonomously. And now we're saying, oh, well, there's actually somebody abroad who has some control over the vehicle. Well, how much control are they actually exerting? Is this technology as good as it's being sold? Is this person in the Philippines controlling a lot more of the movement of the vehicle, operating it like a remote control car? I don't think that's the case. I don't think that, that's actually what's going on, but I think it's a valid question to ask so that we know exactly how much of this driving is autonomous. And if it's not autonomous, who actually is in control of the vehicle?
Right. And so hopefully we hear more info on this because I'd love to hear Waymo's response. They gave sort of a blanket statement. But again, I think it's all valid points. And yeah, again, transparency is key here. Let's see what they say. In New York, this is a biggie here. They have pulled the robotaxi plans. This is from Bloomberg, and they reported, quote, the New York governor has pulled a proposal that would have allowed for commercial robotaxi services outside New York City, a blow to Waymo as it seeks to aggressively expand its driverless fleet this year. The proposal, which was included in the original budget proposal last month, would have allowed autonomous vehicles such as Waymo to apply for permission to pilot their services without human operators in the vehicle. The decision to withdraw the plan was confirmed Thursday by the governor's office to Bloomberg News. The move is obviously a huge setback for Waymo, which is planning to hit more than 1 million paid weekly robotaxi rides in the U.S. by the end of this year. The U.S. had said it plans to expand across 20 cities in 2026 and abroad, including Dallas, San Antonio, Orlando, Nashville, and London. The New York Taxi Workers Alliance, which represents about 20,000 rideshare and taxi drivers, celebrated the decision after earlier opposing the robotaxi plan on the grounds that it could replace some human drivers. This is the first big kind of wall, I think, that Waymo has hit as far as permits, approvals. Can you go here? It was on the governor's desk and they yanked it. I don't think Waymo was expecting this at all.
I don't think so because Waymo has gotten pretty much everything it's wanted
Yeah.
everywhere it's gone. So this is a big setback for them, particularly in such a big market. I have to applaud the governor for taking steps to make sure that everything is in order before allowing the cars on the road. I don't think that New York is going to be a city or New York State where we don't ever see autonomous vehicles. I don't think that's a reasonable place where this ends up. But I do think what they're saying is you need to come on our terms, and we're not going to just get out of the way and allow these vehicles to come in until we are satisfied that there's certain policies and procedures and practices in place to ensure that they don't have a negative repercussion on our workforce, to make sure that they're safe for our community. As we saw with Uber and Lyft, when these technologies just come into town without any planning or preparation, the secondary effects are massive. There are so many different unintended consequences when transportation is uprooted, when jobs are transferred from one sector to another, when people like taxi drivers or now rideshare drivers are displaced. I have to think that there is a set protocol that we can come to an agreement on, whether it's nationally or state by state, that makes sure that all of these different considerations are in fact considered before we have wheels on the road. And that's what I think Governor Hochul has done. And I applaud her for it.
Yeah, I mean, it even says here, and I think they're learning. Everyone, I think, is really learning their lesson through the, rideshare disruptor stage of, 10 years ago plus. And it even says, like, and this is a big deal because it even said excluding New York City, expanding in the rest of the state would have given Waymo a step closer to serving one of the biggest ride-hailing markets in the world. So this isn't like a small step here. This would be a major ripple effect if they're not ready, and the governor doesn't think they are, and I can't fault them for that because, again, this is still very new technology. We didn't cover it in this week, but there's already people being paid to just shut the doors of Waymos because they're not closing. There's still a lot of question marks around all this stuff, so good for them.
Yeah. Yeah. And like I said, it's going to be here. This technology is
Yeah.
going to be here, no question. We just don't need to rush to it. And I think that a little caution, a little discretion can go a long way in making sure that it's done the right way.
Absolutely. And speaking of taking their time, Uber is finally enacting stricter background checks. This is from the New York Times, and they reported, quote, Uber is taking steps to enact stricter background checks after a New York Times investigation in December revealed that the ride hailing giant's policies allowed for drivers with many types of criminal convictions, including violent felonies. The company had barred drivers convicted of murder, sexual assault, kidnapping, and terrorism, but in 22 states, the Times found the company had approved people convicted of most other crimes, including violent felonies, child abuse, adult assault, and stalking, so long as the convictions were at least 7 years old. Now, Uber is preparing to change these policies to bar people convicted of violent felonies, sexual offenses, and child or elder abuse and endangerment from driving. I honestly, crazy. I didn't realize that they let all those go. Once again, this is why, exposing these companies is the way to go. The investigation came out, and now all of a sudden, Uber's changing their policy. Seems
Yeah,
to be the way.
it's the the power of journalism, I suppose,
Yeah.
where when people become aware of some of the ways in which companies make decisions to prioritize profit over safety, uh, there are real repercussions. And I think that Uber got caught in this situation being way too lax on safety. We just had that lawsuit that we talked about a couple weeks ago, that the sexual assault lawsuit in which Uber was found to be liable for negligence in allowing an environment of unsafe, lack of safety. And this is just another example. So there's all these stories coming out where Uber's not doing enough to make sure that the product is as safe as it can possibly be. We have demanded for a very long time that rideshare companies take all practical steps to be safe and to put a safe product on the roadway. And hearing that we're excusing violent offenders after less than a decade to ride, to be drivers on the app and accept passengers. And is there any more dangerous place that you can be than in a locked car with a stranger? I really don't think so. So there just needs to be greater accountability and much stricter guardrails up. And finally, it sounds like Uber may be taking steps to effectuate that, but God, it's maybe too little, too late at this point. Like, how long has this been going on? How many offenders are on the app? How many people have been victimized because these background checks are too lax? Um, it's unacceptable given the nature of rideshare, the fact that people are locked in a moving vehicle together. We need safe drivers paired with safe passengers, period.
Yeah. And, I'm just reading another part of this article, which is crazy, is like the company is considering changing its policy for other offenses, including harassment, restraining order violations, and weapon charges. I feel like, especially the weapon charges, like, why are these people allowed to drive? Um, I mean, come on. I don't know. I feel like maybe too little, too late. I guess I'm glad they're doing some of this, but these aren't small offenses here, especially weapon charges.
Right. And then things like, harassment, like, that doesn't have the same ring to it as, assault or murder, but a lot of what we hear, a lot of the calls that we get are from both drivers and passengers who have been harassed by the other party. People who have had shared a ride to a particular location, and then that person shows up again, whether it's their house or their work. So none of these crimes can be taken lightly. And when they involve these kind of interpersonal relationships where people act in a violent or threatening way, those are not people who should be on the app. Those are people who have histories of doing the exact things that make people feel unsafe in the rideshare world. And companies like Uber and Lyft need to be aware of and sensitive to the facts that there are certain types of criminal backgrounds that, like, you just can't overlook or excuse when you're putting strangers together in this sort of environment.
Yeah, and just like you said with drivers and passengers, I would also argue that the same sort of stringent background check should be on passengers. Because if these passengers are known for weapons charges or attacking people, like you said, we get these calls all the time from both drivers and passengers. A lot of times it's the passengers assaulting the drivers. And so, I know Uber, we discussed this maybe about a year ago. Uber said they were going to be a little bit more serious about background checking passengers. I don't think they've done enough on that side. I'm glad to see they're doing more on the driver's side. But man, this has been, what, 11 years, 12 years or more. Seems to be a lot of time has gone by that they really haven't done anything.
Safety needs to be the number one priority, period. End of statement. And like, it's time we get there. And it's investigations like this that are going to hold Uber's feet to the fire, but it shouldn't take that. It should just, the company should want a safe product because that's good business. And, unfortunately, we just haven't seen that enough in the past decade plus. So, hopefully there continues to be people who are willing to hold them accountable. And because of that, they have to make changes.
Yep, couldn't agree more. But that is the stories for this week. And of course, Bryant, as always, we'll give you the final say before we head into the weekend.
Just reminding everybody that before we head into the weekend, Legal Rideshare is always available for free consultations. Our attorneys can help you recover things like medical bills, lost wages, pain and suffering, any other damage that you sustain. If you were involved in an accident, please give us a call. The consultations are always free. All of our contact information is available on our website, legalrideshare.com.
Thank you, Bryant. And as I like to say, that is the end of This Week in Rideshare. See you next week.